Hello everyone and welcome! I'm a big fan of the Zelda series. That's right, the Legend of Zelda. And I have some, let's say, edgy opinions about these games. And I thought, with Skyward Sword coming out, maybe I should make a tier list and once and for all declare which Zelda games are the best and the worst. You know how a tier list works. We have S through F, and I'm going to take each game and put it in one of the categories. All these are Zelda games I've played. I have not played them all. The last time I played any of these games was probably at least 2 years ago. So I'm going off memory. One thing I should mention is that most of these games are a 9 or a 10. So we're really splitting hairs here. Without further ado, we have a lot to go through. I'll just go ahead and get started. Ocarina of Time. When this game came out, it was a game changer. I remember at the time it was Hyrule Field was the big deal. It was like, oh my god, this is the biggest area in a video game ever. It's huge! And of course today it's not that big. I recently played this game on the 3DS, well, a few years ago. And it's still magic. It still holds up. I think a lot of people loving this game is due to nostalgia, but what it did was just so groundbreaking. There's nowhere else we can put this one except for S. Because even today, I think it still holds up against all these games. And the original one, with all of its polygons, just has so much soul. When Link leaves Saria, the story is so bare, but it hits you. And I want to say one other thing. I never knew until recently that the water temple was a problem for people. I think the problem isn't the water temple. The problem is you. You're not that good at video games. Oh, I can't get past it. I just don't have the time or patience for you brainlet video gamers, okay? We have high expectations for our video gamers, our gamers. Do better, be better. Let's make a controversial pick. I don't get people's love of top-down 2D Zelda games. I just don't understand it. The 3D ones are so much better. And I hear people say to me all the time, oh yeah, my favorite Zelda is A Link to the Past. And I'm like, why? Now I get it. Nostalgia, it's sort of what I just touched on Ocarina of Time. I'm sure it was the first for a lot of people of this kind of RPG kind of genre, which is not an RPG, of course. I'm going to take Link to the Past, and I'm going to put it in the C tier. You know why? Because I just don't care. I don't care about the 2D Zelda games. They're not as fun. I'll also say this. I don't like the colors. I don't care. Yeah, I don't like the colors. I had Sega Channel back in the day. I was a cool kid. And there were a lot of RPGs that I used to play on that. I would argue some of those were better. I guess from there we'll go to the sequel, which came up for the 3DS, which is A Link Between Worlds. The aspect of becoming a flattened painting was interesting. What is far overrated about it is the whole, oh my god, you can pick your own weapon and go in your own order. You don't have to go in the order that Nintendo tells you. And it's like, who cares? Honestly, whatever. And of course, that aspect was later implemented in Breath of the Wild, and they cite this as their first step towards doing that in Breath of the Wild. What I liked about Link Between Worlds the most was the whole flip of an alternate dimension, I guess. I don't know. There was another Link, and there was another Zelda. It probably belongs in the same tier as A Link to the Past. It was very good. I enjoyed that game. But after it was over, I wasn't like, wow, that was incredible. Let's go with the obvious. The Adventure of Link. Zelda 2. When Zelda 1 was made, they didn't quite have their feet in the ground as to what Zelda was going to be. So probably the most radical change was The Adventure of Link, which played a lot like Superman for NES, or Who Framed Roger Rabbit for NES. This is clearly the worst Zelda. It doesn't follow the formula. I haven't played it in a long time, so maybe I'm wrong, but right now, I'm giving it an F. Link's Crossbow Training. This clearly belongs in the S tier. I'm kidding. This was a game that came out for the Wii, and if we're being honest, it was a cool premise, but with the limitabilities of the Wii, it just wasn't that great. It could be cool, I think, with the Switch, because the Switch's aiming and everything, like in Splatoon 2, is fantastic. It's so good working on the Switch, but for this, no. Do I give it a D or do I give it an F? Let's just put it in the F for now. Let's try and clear out this side here. Windwaker. When Windwaker was first announced, boy did shit hit the fan, because people were like, okay, I think this was after Majora's Mask. Yeah. It was like, what's the next one gonna be? Is it gonna be super lifelike? What's it gonna be? And then it came out and it was, what? Cartoonish? What is this? These autists lost their freaking mind. And I remember I read it in a magazine. And I thought, this looks like it could be cool. Let's give it a chance. And it's frickin' great. I know a lot of people will say it's too easy, but I mean, let's be honest, it's all easy if you're competent. The exploration on the ocean, so many islands that you could explore. This truly was a game where there was stuff for you to find. You felt like you were an explorer, and that's what it was all about. And the art style, oh, so good. And the music is probably the second best after Ocarina of Time. Dragon Roost Island? Come on. I did play this again for Wii U, the remaster, the HD remaster, and of course it includes the ability to move your ship faster through the water so you don't spend so much time sailing. Great improvement. I cannot recommend this game enough, especially the HD version. I think the risk that they took making this game, defying all expectations, makes this an S tier. Shall we discuss Majora's Mask? Majora's Mask stresses me out. I didn't play the 3DS remake because having the clock constantly tick on you is just, I can't handle it. I mean, I probably should give it a try. But what I love about Majora's Mask, again, they switched up the formula. And Termina, this is the only game that has Termina. I was really hoping that the Breath of the Wild sequel would be Link going to Termina. And maybe it still will be, I don't know, but how amazing would that be? We haven't been there in so long that you could do anything with it. Of course, the idea that this is like a purgatory for Link, I love that. And I love how dark this game is. Everything is like dead or dying. I think this one is in the B tier. And of course, Majora's Mask also introduced us to Tingle, who should have his own game. I'm still waiting for the adventures of Tingle. Let's go to The Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass. This came out for the DS, and what I really liked about it was the way you control Link with the stylus. If you haven't played it before, you actually used the bottom screen to make him move with your pen, and then you would slash with your pen to make him swing. The problem is there is a central tower you had to go to, okay? And every time you beat like a dungeon in a different world, you had to go back to this tower. And let's say the tower had like 30 floors. I don't know if it was that many. But every time you had to go back to that tower, you had to start from the beginning. This, to me, is inexcusable. And it's the reason I can't truly love this game. And so I'm going to put it in the C tier. The sequel to that, Spirit Tracks, was basically the same game. It takes place 100 years after, same controls, but it didn't have that annoyance. The train driving mechanism was whatever. But again, another attempt by the creators to do something new. And this is what makes this series so good, is that every game tries to do something new and different from the previous one. So, I'm putting this in the B tier because it didn't have that colossally annoying go to the same dungeon and do it over and over and over again mechanic that Phantom Hourglass did. The original Zelda. I'll just be honest with you, I'm not that into it. It's just kind of repetitive. It's limited. It's an NES game. The landscapes are not, let's say, Kirby for NES, which is probably the most beautiful NES game that truly pushed the boundaries of what that system was capable of. This was, of course, revolutionary, but I just don't think it's held up that well. Go ahead and scream at me if you want. I'm putting it right here in the D tier. Link's Awakening. This is the logo for the new remake because the logo was identical to Link to the Past, so I didn't want to put the same one in there. But Game Boy. There isn't a more based system than the pure black and white Game Boy. And for what they were able to do and how beautiful that game looked on the Game Boy, I'm gonna go ahead and put this on the B tier. I haven't played the new one. I think the art style is really cool on it though. The Minish Cap. This was another 2D top-down Zelda. And it came out for the Game Boy Advance. And it came out after Windwaker, so it had the Toon Link style. And had this cute green cap. This game was good. I am gonna stick it in the C tier. I think it belongs with its other 2D friends. Breath of the Wild, what needs to be said about this? I feel like what Ocarina of Time did for video games, Breath of the Wild did again. It really sort of feels like the original Zelda blown up into 3D graphics and Ocarina of Time on steroids. The music, sort of its lack of music, beautiful. One of my favorite memories of video games is playing Breath of the Wild at the very beginning, being weak, having the weakest sword and the weakest shield, and having to sort of sneak around. Like these little red guys would kill you. When they notice you, and all this detail that's put into it, you want to talk about soul. This game is jam-packed with soul. But it just felt like something was missing. There was a lot to do. There were a lot of cool things. The lore was really cool. I remember running through the cave, jumping, pulling out my arrow to shoot at one of the guardians, going in slow motion, and being like, wow, this is cool. Jumping off the mountain, fighting a dragon. But the world, for as big as it was, felt empty, and I know that plays into the story. But when I think about Wind Waker, and I think about Ocarina of Time, those worlds didn't really feel as empty to me. And as much of as the story is told in Breath of the Wild, very subtly, a lot of times through discoveries on a wall, like hieroglyphics or whatever, you sort of figure out where it is in the timeline and all of that. I don't know, it just something was missing on Breath of the Wild. I'm putting in an A. Breath of the Wild is technically a perfect game. Probably the most perfect game ever created. But something's missing, and I can't really tell you what that is. So I'm putting it in A. All right, Twilight Princess. I liked the dark that this game went for. Not quite to the level of Majora's Mask. I liked being a wolf. That was fun. Twilight Princess felt to me like a remake of Ocarina of Time. Very similar map, depending on whether you played it for GameCube or Wii, because oddly enough, they flipped it for Wii because they wanted you to be able to swing the sword, and Link was left-handed. So in order to put the sword in his right hand, they flipped it for Wii. It probably is the safest Zelda. It took the least amount of risks of all of them. I'm not going to penalize it for that. And of course, a lot of people don't like that Ganondorf was sort of shoehorned in. I mean, yeah, If you're gonna make him the villain, make him the villain. Why keep it a surprise? But whatever, that's not a big deal. Twilight Princess is solid, but I will stick it in the B tier. And finally, the one that just came out as a re-release, Skyward Sword. You want to know something crazy? Because I know this game is reviled amongst people. I love Skyward Sword. I would say, technically, it's my favorite Zelda game. I really like going like this and trying to figure out how to kill the bad guys. Yeah, it's a little gimmicky, but of course it was something new. The story in that game was probably the best in all of the Zeldas. The one thing I hated about this game was how many times you have to kill that giant thing that keeps coming out of the ground and you're like, holy shit, will you die already? I think it was 3 times. And I just remember running on the back of like this air whale, and that's when I thought, this game is epic. Like, they really did an amazing job. Now, because it was the last of the traditional 3D Zeldas, in which the formula is go to dungeon, get item, open next area, repeat, repeat, repeat. People felt that formula was overdone. And so I feel like it gets dumped on for that. And also, I have to tell you, I loved the art style. This sort of like painting look they went for. And I know it was because of the limitations of the Wii, but I thought it was a very cool art style. So I am putting this in the A tier. Here is my tier list. Well, yeah, so there you have it. I have sorted the Zelda games as I see fit. Please let me know what you think and what your list looks like. Feel free to leave your list in the comments if you would like. All right, so thank you very much for coming and enjoying a trip down memory lane.